Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night to David Tomlinson. Welcome to Umpire at Home. I think we're on episode 14 now, and I'm, as always, very excited to be here. You might notice things are a little different because I've actually got the overhead lights on. It is a very Irish day here in Calgary. It is overcast, it's been raining for about a week, so I feel like I've really prepared mentally to having our guest today on, who is none other than Ali Keogh, and I'll be having her on in just a moment after I give you guys all a chance to get yourselves situated and queued up. Good morning, Simon. Great to see you. Rutger is tagging a bunch of people. That's good. Who else is on the broadcast? I want to see you all. Um, Remember, we're going back to the regular format, as it were, the format that we've indulged in a few times, which is where you guys are able to watch the game in your separate browser at home. And don't forget, I'm always wondering because I do this so far in advance. I'm not sure if I've actually done it correctly, but that is the game that we are going to be watching. It's Belgium versus New Zealand in Belgium, and will be great. Robert, great to see you. TRS, nice shirt. Where can we buy one? That's coming. It's a funny story about these sort of merchandise things. I tried out this company who does, the individualized printing, so somebody can go into your store and buy just the one thing and get it sent. And I got a big shipment, including this shirt, but the rest of the stuff really sucked. I was so disappointed. The print quality is terrible, so that's not something I'm putting out there for you guys because that's awful. I want my stuff to be quality. And so, this shirt worked out, but the other ones did not. So I'm still on the hunt, looking for other opportunities. Liam is here. Good morning or good afternoon to you, sir. Gary says good afternoon to both Keely and Ali. Andy, is my volume low? It could be. Let me turn it up for you a bit. Andy, let me know if that's better. Stain, good morning from sunny Antwerp. Why is it always sunny in Antwerp, Stain? I want to know this. Should I move there? Really? I think I should move there. Morning to the Zeds. Paul, good afternoon. Normal, good to see you again, as always. Simon, Steve, Godders is on board, even though he's masquerading as his lovely better half. Woo, Hugo, good morning. Where's the video? Where is the video? The video is here, Normal, and it's also in the description of the Facebook post. So hopefully that gives you all the directions that you need. And remember, I'm going to be putting up the match cues so that you can feed up, because we're not going to sit there and watch the entire halftime and things like that. And hopefully he's there. Tyrone, my third favorite South African, is here. Wait, do I have more favorite South Africans? That's true, I guess. Peter, Mishi. I'm going to have to think about that. That's a tough one. And let's see. Caroline is here. Or bring back the bully shirt, says Paul. No, I'm not wearing a bring back the bully shirt, Paul. I don't like the bully. We've had this talk. Matt and John and I am not on the bring back the bully bandwagon. I support their efforts to do anything subversive, though. I think it's fun. Alan Dow, good to see you. Good morning. James is here. Good. Hey, I need to send you that message. I forgot. It's been a week. That's better. Elsabie's here. Simon Dye's here. Darth's here. Best named person in hockey right there. Stuart, wow, the pushpad pundits are here. Did I miss the last one? The Glow Ho shirt is coming, we think. Send me one. Canada, I'm ready for this. Jabu's in the house. Yeah, okay. So I think we got a good collection of people that are here. Let's see, there's about 50 of you online so far, which is wonderful. And I know everybody pops in and out because this is a long presentation. So no offense taken whatsoever. I know it's not us. We are thoroughly entertaining for the whole time. So I hope you love it. Negrito, hey, Fernando, it's good to see you. Mike D is here. Roshi, buenos dias. Buenos Aires is in the house. Good to see you all. Okay. I think I've jabbered on long enough and said hi to everybody. Good morning, Terry. Blow you a kiss. Come on. I'll do this. Okay. So we are getting started this morning back to having an umpire dissecting their game. And I am very pleased to bring on with all of us here none other than Ali Keogh. Come on, Ali.
Hi.
Welcome to Umpire Home. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm really well, thanks. Really well. Other than this whole gloomy stuff, how do you do this? How do you do this for like
I
months on
don't
end?
get used to it.
I mean, I've obviously spent time in those places, and I lived in England for a while, but man, I just couldn't get used to it, just the constant gloom. But I guess that's
That's why
why
I'm so
it,
pale.
that is why you're pale, and that's why you've got such beautiful greenery around, which is something that we don't have. We just have like mountains and grain and stuff like that. So there you are. So, Ali, you picked out a game that you did last year in the Pro League in 2019, and it's Belgium versus New Zealand. I want you to tell me, because you and I talked about this a little bit this week, about what you were sort of going through in terms of travel and your appointments all during that time. So, why don't you set the stage for all of us? Where were you at this point? How many games had you done? What was all that like, and what kind of mental state were you in as you're going into this game?
Yeah, so this was for me anyway, if we count all the videos and match on field games in the year, this was game 14 out of 17. And the Pro League had obviously been running, well, for me personally, since February. So there was this 20-week period between February and the end of June
Hmm.
where for 16 out of those 20 weeks, I was not in Ireland. I was
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Wow.
Um, so that was very different to, I suppose, what you usually be used to with hockey. Usually you
Hmm.
have months in advance. It's one, maybe two tournaments a year. You get to prep for that. You arrive, you've got your briefing, you've got your normal roommates, all those kind of things. Whereas this was just get home, unpack your bag, go to work, repack your bag, get back on the plane.
Right.
Um, which, at the time was actually great. And obviously, it allowed you visit countries and see people and do great matches, and it was just go go go. But I suppose looking back in this game and kind of now, particularly being in lockdown and literally not being allowed to go near a hockey pitch, you suddenly realize actually how tired I was.
Mm.
And not only that, from like a kind of a bigger picture perspective, I got my badge in 2013. And for the first 4 years, I had only done something like 30 games. But between 2017 and 2019, I had done 40 just in those
Wow.
2 years alone. So like when we came to this game, like we're in the thick of that, coming to the end, and like in hindsight, no, like, this is just, but actually it probably was quite intense.
Yeah, that does sound super intense. And we were also talking about the difference between sort of that tournament feeling where you go to one place and you're there for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks if it's a really big one, and you really kind of get settled and you get comfortable with the team. How did you find the difference between that, which is what we've been accustomed to this brand new format of just popping in, sometimes for one game, and then
Yeah.
jetting off? How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of end up going on autopilot because you're having to go week in, week out. There's sort of no time to adjust. You have to do it. You
Hmm.
have to arrive and you have to perform. But again, in hindsight, everything that I had done in terms of my prep and everything up until this point had always been with tournaments in mind and with that kind of routine based thing and knowing where you're going, who you're going to be rooming with, all those kind of things. And while there were bits of that in the Pro League, like there was a week I spent in Argentina where there was, four of us there and we were the same people.
Yeah.
When you got to that European leg, it was literally in and out. Um, and yeah, I mean, at times it felt kind of vulnerable because there wasn't always a UM there. Your colleague might arrive in literally by car a couple of hours beforehand.
Right.
Your UM might arrive by car and have to leave straight away because they've got work the next day. So it's just a different, I suppose, preparation and set of skills that you need, because you have to be prepared for the fact that you might be on your own a lot more and you are more exposed. And while that allowed you have probably conversations and moments with coaches and players that you never usually would have because you're in that bubble of a tournament, at the same time, if stuff went wrong, it was like, oh, you stand on your own 2 feet here. So it was different. And in hindsight, I suppose, well, certainly I didn't realize how different would be, and maybe what I might need to do in future to prepare differently for that.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, and what you sort of learned, and how you saw your performance from your eyes and your perspective being impacted by all these factors as we get this game started. And you can lead us through some of those things, because I'd love to hear all about that stuff. So hopefully everybody at home, you've got the match queued up. I think we are. Let's see if I can pop this onto the broadcast. There we go. So at 1:35:37, if you're on the FIH live, and I'll pop it onto the screen one more time if I do that right. Yep, there we go. That'll pop through. Oh, there it goes twice. Well, that's not going to work because, sorry, we have an extra G in there. And Ali's back. See, look, I've got the applause going every time you come back on the screen. This is awesome. So if everybody is ready to go, we are going to get the first quarter started, and we're going to go in 3, 2, 1, and off we go. And I'm going to turn down my own volume here because it is very loud in my ears, and I want to hear Ali and not the commentators. There, great. Okay, here we are. Okay, so the game's getting set. You're on field with Michi Meister, and you and I talked about this beforehand. What was the first thing you noticed about your game that gave you a little pause for thought, something that you maybe weren't as happy with as you got into it?
I
That's
talk a
called a
lot.
leading question, I think.
Yeah, listening back to this game, the mics from the umpires are quite loud, but
Yeah.
you don't hear Michi half as much as you hear me. I am talking a lot in this game, which looking back annoyed me, because I was, why am I talking? Because it's not that effective, I feel, in places. At times it is relevant, but yeah, it was really noticeable to me, and I kind of went, why am I talking that much? I never usually talk that much, and I didn't feel it necessarily needed it. And for me, if we go back to what we were saying a few minutes ago, that was the cue that said you were tired.
Ah,
Because that was, I suppose, something that I would consider an old habit. Or there's nothing there. Little things that I just have gotten out of the habit of saying suddenly came back in. Did it
yeah,
affect the game? Probably not. But actually, for me, it was now, a year later, a sign that you were probably a little bit fatigued at this. So yeah,
absolutely.
it was interesting
And
to
there's
hear
definitely
it.
different forms of communication, right? There's what I would call a reactive communication. So you've made a decision and then you're explaining it to the players, you know, like, hey, just, I saw the foot, it was a foot, it was danger, it was, those sort of things. There's the proactive communication of, this is what I want to see next. And then there's sort of
Yeah.
the warning conversations, like, okay, I don't want to see that thing that I just saw anymore. And so would you feel like, some of those forms of communication are more important to keep going than others, maybe?
Yeah, I think it depends on the game. Like in this situation, I think Belgium could have potentially still got fourth. I think New Zealand were probably coming to the end of their tour and they were on their way home. So there was still something to play for here. And I suppose at the start of a game, you don't know whether teams are going to come out and whether they're going to want to play, whether they're going to be quite tight, how they're going to be. And I suppose your management and your communication has to adapt to whatever is in front of you. You know, if it looks like it's going to be a tight game, you might have to do a lot more talking at the start, or, you know, kind of
Yeah.
proactive work at the start to make sure that it settles.
Yep.
If it starts quite open and it builds up, you might have to do the opposite. And I suppose it's trying to read the cues from the players, I think, is really important. I certainly would never really want to lose any of those kind of forms of communication.
Right.
But if I was going to lose any of them, those little ones of, yeah, it was a foot, I've got it. If they don't add anything and they're not needed,
yeah,
over the last couple of years, I've tried to cut them out so that then when you do big ones, like I didn't like that, stop it.
Yeah.
Something like that, then they become much more effective.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So we're at the point in the first quarter where we're on our first video referral, and it's taking a little bit of time here. And this is down in Mishy's end. And you had some interesting comments about this particular one, because it essentially what happened was Belgium was asking that there wasn't a foot, but then Ben had seen something just after that that was in fact a foul against Belgium, I think a danger or something like that. And he ended up upholding the penalty corner result. But at the same time, you guys had to communicate, as Ben's doing right now here on my particular feed, that Belgium kept the referral. Now, how did that all work?
Yeah, I think this whole thing of when a team keeps or loses their referral, for me anyway, is still a little bit grey. And they had brought in this kind of guidance that if something had happened, so say Mishi has given a corner for a foot or something here, I would say there was a stick tackle that maybe she hadn't seen, or something that happened beforehand that then impacted play. We were told, look, if there was no foot but there was something beforehand, still give the corner.
Right.
And they wouldn't lose their referral. It was a different incident.
Right.
But it kind of, that whole thing of whether it's the same incident or if it's just afterwards wasn't necessarily clear.
Yeah.
And so the regulations, if you get downgraded or, you know, you don't get your decision upheld as a team, you should lose it. And we're obviously 3 minutes into the game here. So losing a referral at this point is a huge decision. And it would obviously have massively benefited New Zealand if Belgium had lost that.
Right.
And so there was this kind of grey area. And in a way, it's still kind of there. And actually, probably because it's not a rule, it's a regulation, it's probably a little bit harder to kind of really get to grips with.
Yeah.
The New Zealand coach particularly, we'll say, annoyed by this, as I said, because of the impact on the game and because it is that little bit of greyness. And at the end of the day, what we're told is come down to fairness. If they get their question right here, is it fair that we take it away? And it's not entirely, or certainly wasn't at the time, because it was this new guidance as to what should really be happening. So yeah, it was just a little bit confusing. And actually the New Zealand coach at the time kept coming back to it. This is a big decision. They've not lost their referral. I'm not sure. So, you know, it kind of kept going for most of that first half.
Yeah. Wow.
Which was
right. And it's fascinating because I don't know, maybe he thought that was something that you'd go back and correct after the fact, and that's why he felt it would have been fruitful to continue. Because I mean, coaches sometimes get a little hung up on things, but not usually for that long, especially when it happens so early in a game. You think you could have maybe let that go a little bit, done an Elsa.
Yeah. I mean, we actually, so the coach of New Zealand now, and you know, who's only a couple of games in, is Graham Shaw, who is an Irish guy. And I was bench side, and being bench side, I was actually closest to his bench. So again, I don't know that, again, if this is like a tournament type situation, there's kind of a little bit more strictness in terms of how much you will interact with the coach or not. But at Pro League, that was much more fluid. And was there a little bit of, come on, Ali, you know, and that familiarity that he had with me coming in? Potentially, because Graham knows me well enough now to probably know how far he can talk to me, and when I'm going to tell him that's enough. So was he continuing because I didn't tell him it was enough? You know, I don't know. But those dynamics definitely came into the pro league a little bit more, because there were teams you saw more, there were coaches you saw more. And so, yeah, as I said, you were having those conversations with people that maybe you wouldn't have at a tournament. So it certainly
Yeah.
opened up kind of new experiences in that way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. That's something that we've touched on in many of these episodes, even when we were talking with Tomas and we were talking with Adam Commons, and that sort of, it was really great to have that accessibility, but there was a downside to it, right? And wonderful to have the communication and the dialogue, but there is a flip side to it that you experienced yourself, right? And maybe you can, tell us a little bit more about maybe a recent experience that you've had where you had that nice proximity and dialogue, but it was tough. It is tough for you because, as you said, you're vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, here I wouldn't have said that this was a problem. I think that, I said Graham knows me well enough that he knows when to stop.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't have said that his kind of interaction with me here affected me or was negative or anything like that. And as I said, I think it's a familiarity thing, and we had a really good chat in the hotel afterwards about it, as
Yeah.
we often do. But I said, when things go wrong, it's not necessarily always the same. And I suppose the the biggest example was I was over in China, and had probably only my third time in the video box, which is a completely different situation to on pitch. Um, the setup changes every venue you go to, the
Yeah.
quality of cameras changes in every venue you go to, the text beside you change in every venue you go to, and you don't get training in it. And while it can seem real simple at home to sit there and go, well, of course that's a free hit out, or it's an obstruction, or it's a whatever, when you're there and you're making the call and you're having to do it quite quickly, it's completely different, and
Yeah.
you can't train for it. So anyway, I made a huge error in this Germany China game, China Germany even, about an obstruction at a penalty corner. And I probably around 30 seconds after I sent the call down, I was like, you've just made an absolute balls up of that. And I just went, oh my God. And being in China, we obviously didn't have access to the internet as much, so I didn't know what was going on or who was saying what, and I couldn't get kind of confirmation or chat to people or whatever. So it was a couple of days really before I got access to what was being said about it. And it was in Beijing airport at 2 a.m. on the way home. And I had seen that the German captain had put up the incident and had questioned, the safety. And I mean, I said it was completely wrong. I
Yeah.
got it completely wrong. Um, and to be fair to her, she didn't put my face or my name onto it, but it doesn't take that much to figure out who it was. And I was just floored by it. I was sitting there being like, oh my God, these retweets and everything I opened, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, just had it going over and over.
Yeah.
And here I am, 2 a.m. on my own in Beijing. And I just went, oh my God. And so anyway, I'm boarding the plane to Germany with the German team. And Muller
As you
Wieland,
do, as you do.
yeah, of course.
The team that you've just bollocksed up. Yep.
um, well, exactly. And so Muller Wieland came over to me and she just kind of went, look, you've probably seen the social media post about this. And I just looked at her and I just went, I just burst into tears. And
Oh.
she was like, oh, this was not intentional. Um, but she sat down and we had probably a cathartic 30-minute conversation about video, how we learn from it, the training we don't get or do get, what was going through my head while I now thought of it, how we might
Mhm.
improve these kind of processes in the future. And to be fair,
Yeah.
she asked me, do you want me to take this down?
Okay.
And at this stage, it had been up for 20 hours. So I said, look, the people that matter are going to see it.
Yeah.
It's your social media. That's up to you. I'm not going to tell you or ask you to do anything. Those are your decisions. But we probably wouldn't have had that conversation at 2 a.m. in Beijing airport at a tournament.
Yes.
We might have had it, but it would have been in a very different way. Would it have been as open? I don't know. But it was great in a way. It was horrible being in the situation.
Yeah.
But actually, there's probably a level of respect that also comes with the ability to turn around and go, I'm not taking this lightly. This is
Yes.
something that's affecting me. Believe me, I'm not dismissing this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I think overall it was probably a good experience, even if it didn't
Mhm.
feel like it at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I know it would have been very, you would have felt very, conflicted about showing that much emotion and that sort of thing. But at the same time, that's very human. And I mean, who hasn't cried,
Yeah.
after a big call at a big tournament, things like that? I remember, you remember Amy Baxter.
Yeah.
So she and I were in Chile, and it was her first international tournament. This was way back in like 2006. And I mean, I was a grizzled veteran of about 5 years on the circuit. And there she was, this massive, massive talent. You knew she was going to be big. And she came off her first game and she was just bawling. And I put my arm around her and I said, "Good job, hun. You're doing it right." She says, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "You're showing how much you care and how passionate you are about this. And
Mm.
every one of us have been through this. So you're doing it right. Mission accomplished." And she just sort of
Yeah.
looked at me, "Okay." And that was sort of it. But yeah, it's nice that we feel so much pressure to put this facade up, and we do have to be strong and professional and show that side of the dedication to our performance. But there are times for that human element, and you really showed that, and that's really wonderful. I remember that tweet. I remember all that time
Yeah.
coming out. I'm like, oh my God, this is awful.
Yeah.
So there you go. You made it through.
Yeah.
Uh, oh, look at this. You're getting lots of kudos from the folks at home. So this is the good stuff. We got Darth saying great work and great honesty and all that kind of stuff. So, well done. This is important for us to talk about as well, because this is also part of our mental health. It's part of
Yeah.
how we are going to be able to perform on the pitch, because it all does affect us for sure. So that's great. Remember, everybody at home, Ali is here for your questions as well. So if there are things that you want to ask her about specifically, she knows a couple things about a couple things. I'm just saying, postdoctorate, she may have some good information about certain topics. And I do have a few questions that we might get to in a bit. I'm just going to see where we are in the game. We're like 3 minutes left in the first quarter, and there hasn't been anything super big that's happened yet. We haven't had a goal, not many penalty corners, just maybe a couple and that sort of thing. Hi, Ian, good to see you. So maybe I'll pop up one of the questions because we have a good time to do it. Let's see if I can find it here. Just one of the many fitness questions that's coming your way. And Simon is asking, do you have to focus more on it just because of your role in helping the FIH set standards for umpires fitness? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly something I was thinking about a couple of years ago. So I'm not actually involved anymore in the fitness side of things from an umpire perspective, because at the time that I World Cup, kind of, this isn't fair for me to be commenting on the fitness of people who are now my colleagues. Whereas
Yeah.
when I started off, it was kind of just before the London Olympics. I didn't even have my badge at that stage. So to be able to guide them in terms of what tests to do and what sort of standards to set, and how people were doing and progressing back then was very different. And when I became in the thick of it, I was like, this isn't fair on me and this isn't fair on anybody else. And I certainly never wanted anyone to feel that I would have had influence over their selection. I don't feel I ever was at that position, but I didn't want there to ever be a whisper about that, because that's what, you're meant to go out there as a team, and you just don't need that kind of thing. So I probably stepped away from it in around 2017. But in around kind of 2015, when I was still involved, when I was kind of starting to creep up, or certainly wanting to go in that direction, there was probably, look, if there was pressure, I would have put it on myself. And I actually started to go to a personal trainer myself at that stage, because I
I was, what?
yeah Yeah, because like I was always fit, but I was always very thin. And I kind of went, look, there's an emphasis here on looking athletic. And while I might know what to do in the gym, it was really easy to sit in my office and continue typing away on my PhD rather than going to the gym. But if I had a personal trainer who was there and who was telling me what to do and who wasn't allowing me not do the weights that I was capable of just because I felt tired, or that's suppose just kind of motivation, or kind of oversight onto me, that they were making me do what I needed to do. And so I said, look, I want to look more athletic. I'm very slim, but I want to appear to be more athletic, so weights is how I need to do this. On you go. Because I certainly felt that if I was going to be saying anything about people's fitness, it could never be something that someone could say about me.
Hmm.
um and so that, now, no one ever said that to me, but that was just my own feeling about what I needed to bring to it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That would be quite a bit of pressure. So we've just finished quarter one with
Mhm.
very little incident. So here's quarter two. Here's the time cue, 1:14:48. I'll let everybody get a chance to get all synced up with all of that. And while that is happening, let me see. I'm going to put that up there. Whew, I'm adventurous. I'm like winging the graphics everywhere. Crazy. Here's a question from my good friend Tyron from South Africa. How do you react to the toughest crowds, and how easy is it for you to zone all of that out?
Um, Funny, I've never really had a problem with crowds. I would say for me, it's more zoning out the benches or
Mm,
the players, because they're in the thick of it. I suppose the first biggest tournament that I did where there would have been a crowd would have been the Europeans in 2017. And I was really nervous about that crowd, and how I would react, and the Dutch kind of noise and everything they bring to it. Um, I suppose because as my first Europeans, the UN time deliberately put me on one of the Dutch games to be like, you get out there and experience this and see how it feels.
mhm.
Which at the time I was like, but was actually great.
Yes.
Um, but it was also great to figure out that it was that easy to block it out, because you're so focused on your job. It's just a normal game. The minute that whistle goes, you're just looking at what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And you might be kind of, I suppose, aware of the noise, but usually that noise reflects what's going on the pitch anyway, in terms of
Yeah.
how the players are reacting to things, how the coaches are reacting to things. So you can usually judge the temperature by the players themselves. You don't actually need the crowd.
Yeah.
Do I have ways of blocking them out? No, it just happens because I'm so focused on the ball and what's happening around there. Um, but in terms of blocking out the coaches, my biggest trick is to put the earpiece in your left ear, because no matter who's beside you, whether it's the crowd or the coach, it does actually take out half of your
Yep.
auditory signals, and it's
Yep.
amazing what you can't hear when that
Yep.
happens. So
I love
that's
that
probably
one.
my biggest practical one.
Yeah. I love that one. I do that all the time. I teach my umpires when, we're going to a tournament and here's the radio. I'm like, okay, left ear, guys. And they're like, why? I'm right-handed. First of all, I'm not sure that's how it works. But second of all, yeah, being able to block those people, and then your right ear is
Yeah,
open for the people that you want to hear, which are the players and the goalkeeper and
yeah.
all that sort of thing. So I absolutely love that. That's great. Okay, we're gonna get the second quarter started here in a second. And I think yeah, we should be ready to go. So 1:14:48, and we'll get started in three, two, one, and off we go. It's interesting. My feed seems to be a little bit okay. There we go. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit because my first quarter didn't end the way that it was supposed to. Okay, there we go. I'm sure we're pretty much on track. It's pretty casual here. We just wing it. It's fine. It's fine. Let's see. So there's been a little conversation. A few people on the threads have been talking about the color of the shirts that the ball kids were wearing, and that the Belgian goalkeeper is in yellow. And actually, the ball kids are in the bright neon green.
Mm.
So I think on TV that gets washed out quite a bit. We don't realize how different that actually is in person. But but one person did volunteer. Yeah, Neil did say the colors are more the responsibility of the TO at this level, and they absolutely are, right? We have nothing to do with the colors,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. And funny, I'm never really concerned about a keeper wearing the same kit because first of all, I should never be that close to a keeper. And second of all, you would hope that in terms of all the kit and everything that you just don't get mistaken for a keeper. Ball kids though, particularly because I'm usually the same height as a ball child. Um so being, this is something that domestically I have to look at the whole time. You know, they'll turn around, umpires are wearing this, teams are wearing that, and the ball kids turn up in the same color as you, and I'm like, I'm the same height as them, and they all kind of look and they go, oh, we never thought about that. You don't have to worry about that in men's hockey. Now, funny, I actually didn't even notice these ball children at the game, so I think they were very different. I think it would probably be much greener than it looks on the TV.
Yeah.
But I did actually notice at one stage a ball child running along this line and thinking it was myself. So,
I saw that
I,
too. I did see that. I was like, oh, I said,
yeah, why are
oh,
you standing
yeah,
there?
Ellie's a bit behind the
Yeah.
play there. Oh no, Ellie's actually already on the baseline. It's
Oh,
fine. It's
that child.
Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so we're at
But
13
yeah,
minutes here. Let me just see. Okay, we got lots of time in the second quarter to talk about all the things. But yeah, I
but
think
yes,
that's one of those things that fans see more than we notice as we're umpiring because, it's
yeah.
pretty obvious.
Again, it comes down to focus and what you're
Yeah.
you're focusing on. But I'm less concerned about um me noticing the ball children as I would about my colleague finding me on the pitch.
Yes. Yeah.
And we had that problem in, I think it was in New Zealand in the World League final, where the shirts that we had were the same colors effectively as the hoarding, and no one on the bench could see me. So when I stopped
Mm.
time, if I was anywhere near the circle, they were like, "Oh, you're just a floating head," because I was the same height as most of the hoarding. So that would be the only thing that I would ever think of. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just can't change it, like the hoarding. But if it was really obvious with the ball children, well, then yeah, you could. It is the responsibility of the TO, but for the most part, most people are taller than me, so it doesn't come into account.
They know you're not one of the players or the goalkeeper because you just
Yeah,
don't quite look like them. Yep,
yeah,
absolutely. I think, yeah, Gary just pointed out, yep, the helmets, gloves, gloves, pads, everything gives them away. It sure does.
yeah.
So there you go. Let's see. Maybe getting back to the fitness question, there was another one that Simon followed up on this. So, and also James on the broadcast asking about your marathon research and
Mm,
reaching marathoners' targets. Have you run marathons yourself?
no.
No. Good,
Now,
because
I
otherwise
actually,
I'd be like, we're not best friends anymore because running is crazy. If you're not chasing something, why the hell are you running? So,
yeah.
anyway, so you haven't been tempted at all.
I was tempted, but actually, in around 2015, I had a hip cartilage injury, and
Oh,
whatever it is about it, it just doesn't like endurance running. If I do anything that's over 5K, it flares up, and when it flares up, I just can't do anything with it. I do a load of running. I would have loved to have done a marathon, but when it kicked in, I had to figure out what worked for me and what didn't.
right,
And I quickly figured that
right.
running didn't work. And so even though it was my job, and I was telling people what they should do for marathons, I've never actually done one myself. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
hilarious. Well, that leads us
everyone
nicely into
else on
the,
our research team has.
yeah, there you go. That leads really nicely into the next question because Nina asked on Instagram, and sorry I wasn't able to type up your question, Nina. I lost it in Instagram. It just fell into the black hole. Nina was asking, so if you can't do that kind of longer distance running, what do you do for your fitness
Yeah.
when you're, yeah, training?
So I'm in the gym probably 4, 5 times a week, definitely
Mhm.
four. And they're all with the personal trainer that I go to. We would do a mix, so I would do 2 sessions where it's predominantly strength, but it would always have some sort of high intensity, whether it be a bike, a row, burpees, whatever kind of thing to get your aerobic or your heart rate up, would be incorporated into it. So 2 predominantly strength sessions, and then 2 pure conditioning sessions where it's, circus based, it's on the minute, every minute, it's, as many rounds as possible, whatever.
Yeah.
So each session I would do would probably be around an hour in total, including warm up and whatever. And I'll be honest, at the time that the hip injury happened, I was actually worried that my fitness would drop a little bit, because I kind of thought, well, if you're not running, how will you be fit enough to run?
Right.
But being totally honest, the intensity that the guys pushed me to is so high that my fitness has actually gotten better, even though I'm not running, as opposed to worse. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I went through the same sort of thing, especially towards the tail end of my career, where obviously I have really bad knees, and I again wasn't able to do a lot of running. The only time I ran was on the pitch. So yeah, I did CrossFit as well, and those, and CrossFit is a thing, but really it's what people have been doing for ages, which is just high intensity intervals of
Yeah.
whatever style, whatever exercise. And there's a lot of umpires that do a lot of CrossFit. Alicia, I know
Yeah.
I've seen doing a lot, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a really great way. Those really sharp intervals with the rest, that mirrors our running patterns a lot more, I think, what we do on the pitch,
Yeah.
and how it's
Yeah.
like fast,
Yeah.
stop, fast, stop, fast, stop, very stop, start, but it's over a long period of time. We got that whole 60 minutes, we got to do
Yeah.
it over. So yeah, very cool.
Absolutely. And I think as well, again, there's been a huge thing about uh, the visuals of umpiring, and I said, like, aiming for that more athletic look, and to do weights is probably the most effective way of building up some sort of muscular bulk, of looking more athletic, and certainly it's something that's definitely changed kind of the way I carry myself and how I look, completely. So yeah, I'd never go back to a stage now where I don't do that.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's much more
absolutely.
effective.
Really cool. And it's funny because I had to stop doing CrossFit. I actually tore both my shoulders
Oh,
maybe 4 years ago. Oh yeah, I am a glass head. If there's an injury that I could possibly do to myself, I will do it, especially because I'm too stupid to stop when I should. But yeah, my supraspinatus, yeah, tore them on
yeah.
both sides, and had to stop. And I'm the kind of build where I put on muscle very, very easily, and I'm already big. So I would just, when I was doing CrossFit, I got quite packed, but no definition though. So I was like, well, this isn't quite working the way I want, but I felt so good. Like I felt strong. I was, the fittest I'd ever been on the pitch. Having that when I went to play, I felt I had great balance, and more mobility than I usually had. So, you do have to find that, what works for you. But when you're really competitive, like I think a lot of us are, it's understanding your body and knowing that, hey, you're not there to win a CrossFit competition, maybe. You're training for your sport. So make sure that you're tailoring what you're doing to work for you. What do you need for umpiring, if that is your highest priority? For some people, it's not.
Yeah.
So it's all good. Let's see. Simon is asking, have we tried rabble training? I've never heard of this. Have you heard of this, Ali?
I've never heard of it.
Rabble
No,
training.
actually, no.
Huh. Simon, send us a link so that we know what you're talking
That's,
about. That is very interesting. Okay. And then he asks, Ali, do you have any mental preparation routines or anything like that before these matches? I want you to talk about your sports psych, because you mentioned your sports psych quite a bit when we were preparing for this, and I want to learn more about that.
yeah. Do I do any mental prep? All mental prep. Yeah. It's funny because I've had these conversations like over the years with people, and everyone has something that they have to work a little bit harder on. And for some people it is fitness, diet, whatever. For me it was always the mental side. I started going to a sports psychologist in around the time that I got appointed to the Junior World Cup and the 2017 Euro Nations. At the time, I wasn't sure whether it would be video or referral at the Junior World Cup, but I knew there would be at the Euro Nations. And being a perfectionist by nature, I was noticing that, domestically, if mistakes happened, or even if I just thought that mistakes were happening, I would stop managing the game because I just couldn't get that mistake out of my head. And I might still blow
Right.
the whistle and whatever, but I
Right.
wasn't doing what I needed to do. And so I had this big fear that if I would go on to my first tournament with a video referral, that I would have 10 referrals against me in a game and I would just go. And I was like, well, that can't happen.
Yep.
So, if you're having a problem without video and you know that you're going to have video and this is something that you can see happening, let's work on this. Um, so yeah, I went to a sports psychologist, I suppose, recognizing that I needed a little bit more help in that area just to kind of get out of my own head. And so we did a lot of work at the time about being comfortable with being uncomfortable,
Hmm.
and kind of recognizing that there would be times where I wasn't sure about something, or where we know that I've made a mistake and that
Yep.
I had to be able to move on from that. And so there was a lot of kind of thing over what are you saying to yourself? Is that true? What's the influence that that's going to have on you? And how can you change that? And then that was probably during a game, but then before a game, how can you prep yourself so
Right.
that you just know when you get into kind of autopilot? So it was all about kind of setting up routines so that physiologically, much as you do a warm up, that it would be warming up your brain. That, if I have a playlist, or I do like a coloring in thing, or meditation, or whatever it might be, that that would kind of trigger that response in my brain going, you're about to go to a hockey match. And then it would kind of get into the thing of, well, that means that you're going to do this and you're going to visualize that. And, it just kind of got into a thing of autopilot, and what that meant. So that was part of it, and setting up that routine to do it in every single game, no matter what the level was, so that it
Right.
became part of the game. So there was that. There was kind of self-talk during the game, and then there was kind of prepping for what you could control. So there was figuring out, well, where am I going to be staying? Who am I going to be sharing a room with? Do I have control over that? What foods can I bring with me? Anything that made you be a little bit more comfortable, so
Mm.
that when things got uncomfortable, you were already at a place of kind of calmness.
Yep.
And so that was kind of like the first time that I went to her, and it massively helped it out. I would actually say it turned around my umpiring. Um, and so since then, kind of, I've gone back to her anytime that I feel that my problem solving has reached a level where I've hit a block.
Right.
So for the most part, I can figure things out on my own. But when I get to a stage where I think I've seen a pattern, I've tried this, it hasn't worked, I need something else. I might go back for one session or three sessions or whatever it is. And I might not see her for a year.
Right.
Or, I could be back a couple of times in a week. So it kind of depends what's going on. But for me, yeah, it's completely changed what I've done. And then you actually bring it into life in general, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, these are life skills. This is how we can operate at work and with our families
Yeah.
and our friends and that sort of thing. And that, again, it's just one of the reasons that I absolutely love umpiring, is because it is such a complete um, skill set. Like, it's a slow cooker of all the best things that you want to become as a human. And, your resiliency, your coachability, your sense
Yeah.
of service, so many things. But here we go. Anyway, we're just right at a point in the game. We're going to let this roll for a little bit. We're in the last minute of the second quarter, and we are about to have a card awarded. And don't worry, we're going to go back to the clip so that everybody can see where that came from, because there was an advantage played. So at this moment, New Zealand player Sam Charlton's getting sent off, and that was Mishy's card, right? She sent her off from the incident that happened above, and then pretty much on the very next play, as the ball carrier is running up the side, here comes Gurnier's with a little bit of a sloppy tackle. So what we're going to do here is let's Actually, let's let it run to the end of quarter three, and then we'll just come back to this because it just makes it a little bit cleaner. But I wanted to talk about the difference that I saw in those two cards and how, because we talked about cards as they unfolded for the rest of the game and that you had sort of questions and you weren't quite sure of how it all looked. So once everybody gets to the end of that third quarter, let's go to the clip and have a little look. It's quite unusual to get two green cards in such quick succession, but in a way it sometimes isn't because players panic, don't they? They just kind of go
Yeah.
and systems break down, and then they're having to
Yeah.
compensate for those things. So okay, so let's just have a look at the first clip here. So the first tackle comes way up there, and that's where Charlton throws her stick in a little bit. And then as the play continues and continues and continues, obviously waiting for the next best part, next best time in order to stop the game so that the card can be awarded. Because the Belgian player did have great possession and great opportunity to do something with it. So well done. And I can hear you guys talking on the radio. Okay, we're ready to go. And that one looked quite different to me from this one where the ball carrier and the defender's coming from behind, and it's just a very clear bang breakdown. So we go back to the slow-mo. It's coming. And this is just sort of a lungy, slappy, a little bit of a messy tackle there from the front. How did you see that as that unfolded? And how did this, do you think, set up what you were going to do for the rest of the game in terms of those cards?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one there, when you trying to decide what to card and not card, is still something that I kind of need to get my head around. But I think we're always told look at the impact and look at the intent, and there's certain cues that you're told to look out for, and one of them is that teams are on a turnover. And I think that was probably the big thing here. Nobody wants to concede just before a break in play because completely shifts the momentum, completely shifts the power, and particularly at half time. When you have that much longer break and a break in flow, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, if there's a breakdown of a turnover here, it's probably intentional.
Right.
And I think that was probably here that, yes, Charlton was going for the ball, but you can see in her stance, she's caught flat-footed. She's got someone that's running to her who's on a break. And you can see, okay, she's trying to make a tackle, but she does so in a way that's quite clumsy. So I think that was the big thing there, is that we took in, particularly because actually if Mishi hadn't taken it, I would have, but she definitely had the better view of the player's number. Right. It was just a case of that was sloppy. We're coming to, halftime where we're going to have to reset our standards anyway. And the team were on a turnover. So actually perfect opportunity to take out a green card and go, we're not going to have that kind of level of tackling here. And then I suppose it was in my head that if something very similar was to happen for Belgium, that we would have to grab that to make sure that it was even, because the rest of the game had been quite even in terms of what they were doing, in terms of their physicality and that kind of thing. So you want to make sure that you keep it, fair and consistent. And as you said, probably Gurnier's one combined. The issue there is, that New Zealand player who's on the ball is effectively allowed to go wherever she wants, and she decides very intelligently, I'm going to step in field, probably because she can feel Gurnier's behind her. And so rather than just running alongside her, she decides to stick her stick in. And at that point, you just kind of go, well, again, you're on a turnover. It's just before the break. You just had a card. You're kind of not giving me an opportunity to do anything else here.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it was just a nice way before the game ended to just go, right, well, you've had one and you've had one. They're both on turnovers. This stops. Right. Okay. So I suppose that was the whole process. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and I like how you drew attention to the timing of when it happens. So we often talk about where it happens on the pitch, and like you said, happening right after a turnover. But the fact that it's as the quarter is winding down, those are vital stopping times where teams are saying we're not going to concede at this point. So being able to get that break and try to get that whistle and get your teammates packed behind the ball is a strategic decision. So thanks for pointing that out, and that really does help with the thinking there. So let's just make sure that we're all getting queued up and ready for the third quarter. I have a few more questions that I'm going to put to you as we get going in this third quarter here. And I'm going to put that on the broadcast. So Q3 starts at 48:45. And we are still with no goals, right?
Yeah.
I never pay attention to goals. They're just not as exciting as cards and your positioning and all those glamorous things.
Yeah.
All right. So Tyron had another question here, and let me put up the queue. I'll leave it there so that everybody can still get there. And he was asking, how much video analysis do you do of teams? So do you go back to recent matches that they've played in Coach Logic and, have a look at their systems and things like that? Or is there anything like that you do?
For me, it would be more personal and looking at kind of what I've been doing, or us as a pair. And again, actually, so that was something that was, I suppose, challenging during the Pro League, is that if you had on average one game a week, and the video took 24 hours to come up, and then if to clip it and to look at it in the level of detail that you have to, it can take a couple of hours. And to then self-reflect on that and think, well, what am I going to do next time? It's a good chunk of prep. And so to keep up with that actually in the Pro League was quite difficult. Do I focus on what teams do? I think even at tournaments, you don't, until there's maybe a pattern of something that they're doing, or that maybe one particular player is doing, but it's rare actually.
Yeah.
In terms of things like how teams set up, you've got your kind of consistent type press, whether it's half court, whatever. I don't care if Belgium do a half court press, but if a team does a half court press, I'm going to stand differently than if they do a full court press. So it's not necessarily the team's individual tactics that you'd look at, as opposed to, well, where was I standing during this type of press, and how will that affect me in the future, or that kind of thing. So it's much more in relation to where you need to be in response to what they do, as opposed to individual tactics.
So would it be fair to say that in a tournament, teams are doing, leading into a tournament, they're doing different things, so it isn't necessarily all that helpful from your perspective as an umpire to expect certain things to happen system-wise, and that you have to see what they're doing at that moment in a tournament before it makes any sense? Is that kind of fair?
Yeah,
kind of.
I think so, because it's they'll change things so quickly, and as well, you don't want to get sucked into a thing of, this is what the Germans do, and this is what the Dutch do, because they can change it so fast that if you're prepped for something tactically and then they don't do it, but that's been your focus, well, then you'll be out of position, and then you'll be unfocused. So I think it's helpful to have broad ideas, but to expect the unexpected, unless it's something that looks like it's going to become a pattern. And I know you talked about it last week, like that German injection for a corner. That's something we need to talk about. And that's something that's out of the ordinary, and that looks like it's going to be something that we need to consistently manage. But other than that, I think it'd be better to remain quite broad, to basically not react, but be prepared for whatever comes at you in a game.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. All right. I think we're probably ready to start the third quarter here. And so 48:45, I think everybody's ready to go. So we'll start in 3, 2, 1. And yeah, second half. Let's see. Let's go keep on the mental theme here. It's a long question. Josanne, good to hear from you. You're a little frozen for me, Ali, so hopefully you're still with. We'll find out.
I am here.
Okay.
My face.
Your face looks great. That's the best part of all of this. Oh, let me put the question back up so I can read it again. Okay. So what Josanne is asking about is, she's saying that things get heated for her when she, especially in some men's games that she's doing, as the game is winding through. and with all the conflict that comes to her, that she feels like it's distracting her and getting into her mood for the rest of the game. Are there any exercises or any techniques that you can suggest to her to help her toughen up so that doesn't affect her as much with all the arguing that she's and the dissent she's getting from players during a game?
Yeah, I mean, like as I was kind of saying, that was one of the things that was getting me.
Hmm.
Part of it is okay, if things are starting to get heated on the pitch in general, or the temperature is rising, that kind of thing. There's things you can do to the game to try and settle it down. And usually I would say that if the noise level comes up, your whistle level or timing has to get tighter.
Yeah.
See the foul, call it, and let's just calm them down. And usually that would be one sort of thing, because if they're getting worked up, there's some sort of a disconnect happening there. So just let them know, I've seen the foul, I'm just going to blow it. Unless it's the most beautiful advantage in the world, well then just
Right.
keep it really tight. But in terms of kind of the mental side of things, I mean, what I would find was, if they're going, well, often you can't know whether you've made a mistake or not, because the player has a different view, you've got a different view, and things that look like feet from one angle are not feet from another angle.
Yep.
So they complain about certain things. You have to be able to go, okay, well, is what they're saying true? And is it 100% true? And
Hmm.
unless it's 100% true, well, then we remove this, and you can turn around to them and I'll talk to you about it afterwards. And let them know that you hear them. Always speak calmly, but for your own mind, my kind of go-to phrase is what I'm saying 100% true? And if it's not, well then it goes. And I find that actually simply asking myself that question cuts out that train of thought that starts to spiral.
Yeah.
Because the minute you say, well, no, it's not 100% true, you start to kind of go, well, why am I worrying about it then?
Absolutely.
And then refocus on the game.
Okay. We're just at about 13 ish in the third quarter, and we've just had another tackle. And you wanted to bring this up, so I think I am going to bring up the clip because I do have it prepped. So if everybody pauses right on the stroke of 13 minutes here, we can go back to this play. And let me see, I've got it right here. Like a genius. Okay. So you wanted to talk over this because what's interesting for me is, again, this involves Sam Charlton, who's already taken a green card in the game.
Yeah.
So message sent, and
Yeah.
for whatever reason not received for you. So this is heading into Mishy's end. What was going through your head, and how would you sort of deal with this as an umpire? Because this happens to a lot of us, where we see something that's going to our colleague and they handle it differently than what maybe we would have done. What do you think?
Yeah. It's those ones where from behind you've got a completely different angle to the one in front. Um, I think they ended up taking that free so quickly that we just let it go on.
Mm-hmm.
And the whistle I think is quite soft, if I remember it, which kind of sends the signal that there wasn't much to that.
Yep.
But looking back on it and the angle that I had, she's just outside the 25. That's literally identical to what Grenier did just
Yeah.
before quarter time. We've got no choice there.
Yeah.
And I think that required me to stop time and just go, actually, from my angle, that wasn't good enough.
Yep.
I'm going to take this over. And I just back in it was that tiredness thing coming into this, potentially, that little bit of slowness of thought, maybe. Because watching back on this, the minute I saw that, I was like, how did I not card that?
Mm.
So I can't remember what was going through my head at the time.
Yep.
But
Yep.
I would be a little bit suspicious that if there was a soft whistle plus I was a little bit slow in my thought, that the two of them combined to just let me let that go, as opposed to going, nah, we're not having that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Thanks for that as well. I mean, that kind of honesty that, boy, I saw that, and when I see it on video, I should have done something differently. Boy, that happens to all of us for sure. So, all right, let's get this third quarter resumed. We're right at 13 minutes to go. So in three, two, one, let's get going again. And I'm just seeing if there's a different question before, because we've got something coming up at about 10:40 that we really want to talk about for sure. So maybe we'll pop in and out of this topic because this is something that you and I prepped, and another thing that I found that you and I really have in common as umpires. This is Simon asking, having seen you umpire quite a bit, he associates you as being smiley and perhaps bubbly, and you look a little sterner in this game. So let's talk about our faces and our, presentation. And if I cut in all of a sudden because we were going to go to a clip, don't mind me, but
We'll go back.
go ahead, start talking, and we'll make our way through this topic because it's a good one.
Well, first of all, that's a really nice comment to say that I'm associated with smiles, because I do not hear that often when it comes to my umpire. Yeah. If we go back to the start about this, I'm 5'2". I don't even weigh 50 kilos. When I was starting off, I was and still am quite introverted. I wouldn't have been that confident in myself, and as I said, I wouldn't have had any sort of athleticism that I now have. So when you combine all those together, you basically had a small, quiet person walking out onto the pitch that didn't really have a presence. And so I was told, you need to give them confidence in you. You need to show them that you're in charge. You're not big, but you can make yourself big. And the way you can do that is, by having really strong body language and really strong facial expressions, and, making yourself big with them. And so that's what I did. And there were some horrendous photos of me out there making like these big gestures and, sticking my neck out and going, absolutely no more of that. And it worked. It got me a level of, if you want to call it, respect. It was certainly a thing of, okay, well, she's got this, maybe a little bit too much, but she's got it.
Yeah. And so we're right at the moment in the game where I want to come back to, because you do have a moment where you're communicating with the players and you're using your stern body language here. So that's quite a nice little tie-in. So let's see exactly where we are, because we're in a replay. So we're right at 10:30. If everyone wants to give a pause, because we're going to go back to that clip, because there was a couple aspects of it that you wanted to discuss. So as the ball's being crossed in, there's something that happens just over on the other side of you there, on the other side of the goalkeeper. And you stop time and you bring the players over. What had you seen at that point?
So I'm looking at Justin at the penalty spot there, and it's this afterwards from Olivia Merry, and I'm not sure the Belgian girl that is. So yeah, Olivia here is trying to get in front of the Belgian. That's totally fine. But once we now have there, the two sticks are going to come up, and there'd been a couple of incidences. And if I'm being brutally honest, there's been a couple of incidences with Olivia Merry where she does lift her stick, and you're getting into red card territory there. The last thing someone wants is for a red card to come out if we can stop it. And so I knew that they were marking tightly and that there was probably no intent in that. But the last thing I wanted to happen was for that kind of physicality to build up and to go further than that. Because two of them are kind of doing it, and it's much to do with nothing, but you don't want it to become something.
Yep.
Absolutely. Given that it was and that we had a break in play, I went, I'm taking this, and I'm going to be stern with it. So,
absolutely. I think what's really interesting about that particular play, that I think we can all, and we talk about these sort of positional aspects quite a bit, and when you're unsighted, is that there was no way for you to be able to see what happened with Mary's stick. It was literally the Belgian player's body was right in front and blocking any vision that you might have had from that. So the only way that you're going to get that decision is if Mishi is proximate enough, if she's close enough that she can help you with that over the radio, or not over the radio, or if it goes to video somehow. So when I had Thomas Briels on, we went through a little scenario that it was the same sort of sticks, tangled, tussled, and striking, and difficult vision for the umpires. Goes to video, and Jubes comes back with a recommendation for a card. And those are situations that we're fortunate to have the video, but it is something that is going to be really difficult for you to see. And as a team, you've got to have that awareness of working together to see if you can come up with the right result, I think, in those situations. So I hope you don't feel like you should have nailed it, because you couldn't have, but you knew something happened.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that you don't want to go overboard in these things. Your fear is in that moment that you've missed something. And again, when you see sticks up around people's face, you want to make sure that you don't miss anything intentional,
Yeah.
because that's very serious. But unless you're sure about that, you can't deal with it, in a stern way. But to let it go completely just didn't feel right, because it was clear that something was happening, and well, I didn't know what, but I knew it was something. And so the easiest thing to do in that situation was take both of them and go, you're marking tightly, but the sticks stay down, and just get that message across. So
there you go. Okay, let's resume quarter three here. We're at 10:30, so let's get started. 3, 2, 1, and go. My tempo gets off a little bit as I start counting seconds. I have no internal clock anymore. So just another few seconds, we're actually just going to have another video referral that we can talk about a little bit, and then we'll get back to our faces because it's so much fun to talk about. So you've just called a penalty corner, so we're going to have another 40 seconds of getting set for that and that sort of thing. Yeah, Simon, we've got a lot more to talk about expressions and how we try to portray ourselves when we're out on the pitch, for sure. So coming out of this penalty corner, I believe we've got a drag flick, and it may have deflected before, and then it strikes a defending player, on the line-ish, line enough on the penalty stroke. And you did call a penalty stroke on this, so we'll just watch this unfold.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're in the same part that I am, but just right on the injection here. So the ball comes out. Oh, it's not a drag flick at all. It's 2 penalty corners. Oh, this is going to take forever. This 40 seconds is nice sometimes, but how does it feel when you're out there? Does it feel like forever?
No, it's really quick.
Yeah.
Because by the time you get set up and you're making sure everything's okay, and again, if it's with the Germans, there's 2 balls and you've got whatever. It's actually it's very fast, particularly if you need to manage something at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've called your penalty stroke here, and then the Belgians eventually come to you with a referral. What was the question that ended up getting asked, and how did you deal with sort of the conversations that you had with some of the players here?
Effectively, the question was whether it was on target or not. But you can see here, I think, if I'm on the same point as you, as I'm asking the question, the New Zealand captain, who's off camera, approaches me to ask whether the video had been shown on the screen before they asked the question, which they're obviously not allowed to do. And obviously that's the big fear, is that they're checking to see whether it is on target or not before they actually come up to the video. So at that point in my head, I'm thinking, I was probably aware that it was tight, and time has stopped. There's that little bit of I'm going to say leeway there. So the biggest thing was whether it had been shown before they asked the question or not.
Right.
And you're aware that the video has access to the broadcast, so they've probably seen themselves whether it's been shown online or out to the world or not. But there's this whole procedural thing that the minute you go up to video, you're meant to then remove yourself from the process, and then remove yourself from whatever is happening on the pitch. So there shouldn't be conversations with the players. Once it goes upstairs, because you're still mic'd to the video, you don't want to be influencing them, and you don't want to let players sneakily
Wow.
influence them either by being like, well, what about this beforehand? If that's not the question, then that's not what goes up.
Right.
So when the New Zealand captain starts approaching me, she does it in a very calm way. She's very polite, and she actually said, "Can I ask you a question?" And so you're kind of conflicted, and you can see my face. I was like, "Oh, not really, but you're being very nice about it, so I'm going to allow it." Um, but also, I was pretty sure I knew what that question was, because I knew it was tight. And so it was very easy for me to turn around and go, if your question is about time, he's already looked at that, he's confirmed it's okay. And then it just calms the whole situation down.
Right.
But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, if that's not her question, I'm technically breaking protocol here.
Mm.
And you don't want to get a name for yourself of someone who breaks protocols, particularly not in Olympic selection year, because there's so many other things that they're going to be looking at that the last thing you want is for them to think, well, she just went out on her own there with the video. We're not meant to do that. That's a clear thing. And not that that would ever be a selection criteria, but you don't want anything to add to the list of
Yep.
reasons as to why you should not go to something. So it was this kind of thing of, oh, if I don't answer her question, am I being completely empathetic or not empathetic?
Yep.
Particularly if it turns out that it was on the video, because that's a huge
Right.
decision. If
Yep.
it turns out that it was on the screen and that they shouldn't, or get the referral, and then the referral gets overturned, well, so you've taken away what is now a goal for New Zealand. So you want to make sure that you're getting the process right for them, but you want to make sure you're following the protocol.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure you're doing what's best for the game, and yet you want to make sure that you're doing what's right in terms of the regulations as well. So sometimes there's that kind of balance of, well, can I push this a little bit like we did here and say, if your question is about time, I've got it, don't worry about it, but if it's
Yeah.
not, get away.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
suppose that's the balance with it, but
Yeah.
yeah, can sometimes be tough.
Yeah. That's just a couple things to think about as you're going through that whole process. Boy, that's definitely a lot to deal with. So, bringing it out, bringing it back to facial expressions and presentations, I'm saying, well, hey, you know, you managed to get, the smile back on your face. So let's go back to talking about the feedback that you've gotten. And you were saying that you've seen photos of yourself where you've had, your big angry, I call it the Mr. Potato Head angry eyes, where it's not the way you present yourself normally, but you reach into your back pocket, you pull out these angry eyes, you pop them in your head, and you're like, "Argh!" And then you pop them back
Yeah.
out again, and whatever. But what kind of feedback have you had over your career, and how have you dealt with that?
So yeah, I mean, going back to, like, initially it served me well to have these angry expressions or whatever, but then as you start to find your feet and you get more confident in where to stand and how to deal with certain situations, and people get to know you better, like even domestically. Oh, here's
Yep.
Ali, she'll answer my questions, I can ask her stuff, we're okay here, but I got to approach her in a certain way. You end up being able to tone down those big things. So for the most part, I was able to get rid of the big gestures, but I still found that my face was still probably my biggest tool. Um, Particularly my left eyebrow. It's like a running joke in work and at home that if my left eyebrow comes up, you're probably in trouble. Um, but it's totally involuntary. I don't even know I'm doing it half the time. Like sometimes I've got a friend in work who just texts me because I've done it without real. Um, so yeah, basically though, I was able to get rid of a lot of it, but the face still remained.
Yeah.
And I'd only really pull it out when I felt it needed it. And that was becoming less and less. But anyway, then I got to a place where, I was at the kind of the higher level of things. And I would say I was there unexpectedly, in that I certainly didn't think that I was going to be there as quickly as I was. And so, you're around all these people who you've been watching on TV, players and umpires alike, and you're in the midst of them, and you're like, whoa. But the feedback that I got was well, when you're on the pitch, actually, the manner that you sometimes interact with players is arrogant. Um, and then followed up by is also aggressive. And at the time, getting that feedback where I did and when I did was like someone had just slapped me across the face because it felt very personal. It felt like someone was saying, you think you're better than everyone else. And it felt like someone was saying, you're so angry that it's actually threatening.
Yeah.
Which is, not something anyone wants to think of themselves as. And so while I could kind of take it and go, okay, well, there's obviously something I need to work on here, it was also this thing of, well, this feels like they're telling me that that's who I am as a person.
Yeah.
And so it actually took a few weeks before I was able to honestly able to even talk about that. And in those couple of weeks, I had to look and I had to ask myself, am I arrogant? Do I think I'm better than everyone else? Am I an angry person? Is it just my face? And if it's just my face, how do I change that? How do you change your face? Because this is what I'm stuck with. And so I went back to my sports psychologist. I clipped a couple of things that I felt, well, okay, I can see where they're coming from. It's not a great face. And so I literally just plopped the laptop in front of her and I said to her, I needed to look me in the eye and I needed to tell me, watch this clip. Am I arrogant? And she went, okay, fine. So we watched the clip, and the particular clip is kind of like, I think what Simon is saying there is that I, make a decision. There's this split second where I make some sort of a face like, oh, and then we go on to the smiles and the professionalism and the calmness, and everything is fine. So she looked at me and she was just like, right, if we just take before this face, after the face happens, from there on in, you're everything that I want in an official, tick, 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 that's fine. She said, but there's this moment where your face just does something. And she was like, we have to figure out what's going on in your head when you make that face, because you're reacting to something in your head. And so, that might have been one particular incident, but actually I had to pick that out for loads of different things. And where it actually comes back to is that it came back to, again, those old habits that I was so used to when I was starting off. Sell your decisions and be big when you sell your decisions. That if something happened where maybe I wasn't totally sure, or I knew it was a big call and that people were likely to question me, I'd kind of make this face as if to go, oh, what else am I supposed to do? And I frown when I do that, and my left eyebrow goes up. And, while I may not have done the big gestures anymore, that split second of my face sent a picture that said, I'm not connected with you. Yeah. I've done something that you don't agree with, and we're not on the same wavelength here. And then we got back onto the same wavelength, but for that split second, we're not together here on the pitch. And so I had to do a lot of work in making a decision and then saying to myself, take a breath. And in that breath, making sure that my face didn't do anything. And so it was this thing of figuring out that I wasn't arrogant and I'm not aggressive as a person, but that when we'll or questioned or when unsure of something, my face shows my uncertainty, and it does it in a way that says, or that comes across as slightly arrogant. And so I had to accept that. And my sports psychologist was like, you are not arrogant, but your face something that is a disconnect that could be perceived as that. And so when you can step away from it and realize that it's not personal, then it becomes something that you figure out and you fix. But probably something that's very difficult to fix because it's so completely involuntary.
Yes.
And again, the more tired you are, the later you are in a game, and the bigger the call is, the much more likely it is to filter back through. And that's probably the moment that you don't need it.
Absolutely.
So it was this weird kind of moment where I had to figure out how to control something that up until then had just been me and how I react to things. And I
Yep.
kind of thought, God,
Oh,
who do we do? Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, we're gonna come back to a couple of the points that you made there because they're really good, and I think they'll help a lot of umpires as they're looking at their own things. Because I think we're all starting to look at ourselves on video a lot more now. Even at the lower levels, we're starting to video ourselves, and teams are taking more video, and we're doing this analysis. But right now, we're at about 1 minute left, and we're gonna have another little incident here over on the far sideline. So this is sort of in between the areas of responsibility of you and Mishi, and um, there's a bit of a collision here as the Belgian
Yeah.
attacker is going to go around. And I think we can show this clip as well. So if people want to pause really quickly after the replay is shown, we can have another look at it. So we're right at 30 seconds left in the quarter. And you wanted to go through this because you felt like you had your own questions about it.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it was one of those ones where it happened, and you kind of went, "Oh, oh, did she mean to do that?" And you're always aware of an umpire as an umpire that we're always told, the sliding tackle gets knocked out. That's one of the most important things that we need to get rid of. And yet this happened. And you're like, it wasn't a slide. Did she mean to do that? And it was one of the, did she trip? Because if she's tripped and she's just happened to take someone with her and it's a complete accident,
Yeah.
again, you don't want to be whipping out a yellow
Yeah.
card for someone who's tripped over themselves and has accidentally taken someone out. And yet, if she's been kind of reckless or clumsy with her body, then you do want to deal with that because
Right.
she's taken someone out for that. Be in
Absolutely.
control of your body in a way that doesn't endanger someone else. And so again, that was kind of a moment where I think Mishi was much closer to it, but was square to it.
Yeah.
And I was much further away, but at an angle. But at an angle that I was like, did she trip or was that clumsy?
Yeah.
And again, I suppose part of me went, I don't want to get that kind of call wrong, particularly when it's so close to my colleague. And yet, I don't want to not deal with that if that needs to be dealt with. And I think I heard Mishi kind of go, it's fine. So I'm okay, we're going to leave it. But we talked about it for the entire quarter break. And she kind of went, actually, did she just trip over herself or what happened there? And, I think we both kind of realized pretty quickly afterwards that, yeah, it probably was clumsy. It definitely wasn't intentional, but it probably should have been dealt with. But both of us were at an angle where we kind of went, oh, I'm not totally sure. So I'm going to leave it. But again, both of us, the minute we watch it back, go, well, no, it's a yellow card.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're going to go down, you're going to take that kind of risk that you're going to do it properly.
Okay. And just to confirm, to think that if you didn't feel like she had intentionally gone to ground there, that she had made just like stubbed her toe on the pitch and the gremlin grabbed her foot and then she trips over, do you feel like you could have gone back to a green card there, or do you feel like it was past that and you just had to go to that yellow?
I think I think if it was a complete accident, as you said, where the pitch trips her up, or something like that happens, I probably just would have left that. But when you go past that accident, where it's a trip, and go into a thing of someone has decided to go low and then tripped over yourself, I think that's different.
Oh, okay.
Fallen over something and she had no intention. Well, actually, she went low and then lost her balance. So it probably would have gone 5-minute yellow for that.
Okay.
I don't think it's a 10 because I don't think it's intentional, but it was clumsy enough that if you're going to go down to your knees, you got to make sure it's in a safe way. And I think that was the issue, is that neither of us knew how she originally got so low. Did she go low or did she fall?
Right.
And if you're falling, is it fair to to give them a yellow for that. I don't think it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But if you're in that middle ground, which I think she was, well, then we should have dealt with that.
Okay. That's totally fair. That really helps. Thanks. So let's just get started again. We'll spool out the last 30 seconds here so you can go ahead and resume. And don't worry if you're not quite synced up with us. I will put up the cue right now for the fourth quarter so you can meet us there. I don't know, it looks like a 4i, but anyway, the time is 25:48 on the FIH Live broadcast. So hopefully everybody's there and can have a look. And so we're probably going to start the fourth quarter right away. Ali, you and I are rolling, so we'll be able to get to go. So if you're ready to start your fourth quarter, everybody, in 3, 2, 1-ish, and go. So now that we've covered off lots of the management things and particular decisions and things that went, we're probably, we're at this fourth quarter point. Things are pretty well in hand. New Zealand's now up 2 goals, and you talked about how your communication calmed down throughout the game. Like you really picked out a bunch of moments in the first quarter, early in the second, and then there were a few in the early third, and then for the fourth quarter, I think you felt like you got yourself,
Back.
sort of, you got back to the way that you want to umpire at that point.
Yeah.
So so things sort of roll here, I think, fairly well for the two of you as the game goes on. So let's go back to the facial expression stuff. And I know it seems like we're hounding on this, but this is a piece of feedback that you got a big chunk of it. This happened to me in my career as well, where at a couple of only the biggest tournaments, it seemed, I got the feedback as well that I looked very stern and officious when I was, and actually mean was the word that I got fed to me. And like you, it was hurtful. It was personal. It was like, and the phrase that the umpire manager used with me was, Keely, you're so bubbly and fun off the pitch. Can't you just take a little bit of that and put it on the pitch? And I was like, but, so what I liked about what you were talking about before is that you were talking about trying to find what was going through your head that made this happen. And it was the habit of the reacting to the, defensively, perhaps to the feedback you were getting, or just knowing that you would have to deal with a bit of conflict and dissent. And it took me years to figure out that the reason that I looked so stern on the pitch, especially at the big tournaments, was because I was putting so much pressure on myself to be perfect. Right. And I think that it takes a long time to get to sort of that self-awareness realization that that's where your motivation comes from. And now what kind of techniques can you employ to change that thinking? Because you're not going to change your face, but you can change the thinking that sort of goes in your face. So, I mean, I made the comment to you yesterday that one of the things I did was try Botox. And I did. I froze, like my frown lines a little bit, and it did help. But really what helped as I got closer to the end of my career was that I didn't feel that the pressure eased off, because I knew I was coming to an end and I was starting to enjoy myself. So having that awareness of how you are feeling and going through that process, I think maybe can help you if you're not happy with the way that you were going on the pitch, and you went through that process with your sports psych.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, like, it's now understandable why that feedback felt so personal, because at the time I was so shocked that I was even there, that for someone to turn around and say, you come across as though you think you're better than everyone else. I was like, that is literally the polar opposite to how I personally feel. And again, if we kind of go back, not being upgraded in about 4 years to being upgraded 3 times in 1 year. And it had just kind of gone from here to there. And I hadn't caught up with myself, I suppose. And so then to get that feedback that, this is how you're coming across, just hurt. When you can separate yourself out from it and go, well, of course I felt like that, because, you were going through this huge change in terms of your growth and your progression. And then this came up and you were at a big event and, you have all the complexities around that. And the kind of the emotions and the overwhelmingness of it and whatever, it now makes sense. But at the time it was really difficult to separate it out. But so yeah, like, I mean, with my sports psychologist, I've we kind of, I think actually that probably only took one session, because she was just like, you know, you have this moment in time after you've made a decision to decide how you're going to react. And in that moment, I just need you to just count to three. Just in that moment, give a decision and then go 1, 2, 3. And by that time, the reaction will probably have come, and you will not have reacted to it. So that was probably the big thing. And that was just something to practice. And is it there yet? Not completely. It's probably never going to be always there. But it's something to kind of continue working on. And then after the Olympic appointments came out, I ended up going back again, because now we were on to kind of like a different level of hurt and a different level of kind of internal self-reflection and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's going to be personal for everybody, and everyone's reactions are going to come from a different place. But I suppose it's almost easy now, when you're in lockdown and you can't go to hockey and all these kind of things, to now step back and watch a couple of these games and go, well, actually, be a bit nicer on yourself. This was going on and that was going on, and never mind real life.
Yeah.
So as you said, that self-awareness becomes stronger the more you go on, but also with hindsight. So things like this are actually quite helpful, because you can kind of go, oh, I hadn't thought of that in a long time. And now I can see why I was talking, and now I can see why that was hurtful. And, now I can see whatever, but actually now I can also see that I've gotten past that, or that I've am getting past it, or that it's still progressing, or that it's an area I still need to work on. And it can be, when you're in the thick of it, it can be really difficult to step out from it. But as long as you have that kind of, whether it's a person or a sports psychologist or whatever, that can take you out of it, I think that's probably one of the most important things to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I also talked about, we both are the kind of people that when we get feedback, we take it on board and we want to address it. We're coachable. I think all of the top umpires, that's the one thing that you guys really have in common, is that you are all very dedicated to your craft and solving problems and taking those steps, because you know that that's how you've gotten to where you have. But there's also the interesting aspect that, here we are, two people like us who have both gotten the feedback as women umpires, that when we're on the pitch, we look too aggressive. And I'm wondering if there might be a little bit of a gendered aspect in that kind of feedback. How do you feel about that?
It was something that I certainly asked myself, because again, when you're at the pro league and you're videoing the men's games, or you're watching a lot of clips, and because we're becoming much more aligned now, we're watching each other's clips and games much more closely, so you probably see things that maybe you didn't. I suppose, it would have been in my head that to look out for how other people are or are not aggressive, to figure out how I needed to portray myself or whatever. It did strike me. I was kind of like, well, if I did that, I'd probably be crucified, or the players wouldn't take it in the way that the male players do. Want to get into like a gender debate, but I do think that there's less room to be aggressive inside. Now, whether that's just in general or whether it's also what the players expect from you, I'm not totally sure. I know I've had conversations with coaches where they've kind of said, well, why can't you be more like, Servetto, or, talk to the players like that? And for one of them, I actually ended up turning around and say, right, think of this person on your squad and think of something that he said to you. And now imagine that coming out of my mouth to your player. How
Yeah.
do you think she'd react? And he
Yeah.
looked at me and he was like, ah, she would go bananas. I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So part of it is actually the style of game that they play. There is
Yep.
more aggression on a men's hockey pitch than there is on a women's hockey pitch. So
Yeah.
then is there less room as an official to give that? And is that to do with the game or is that to do with, gender?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the
Yeah.
answer, but I do think that there's less space for it.
Yeah. And even if it is a societal aspect coming in, it doesn't change the fact that when you're out there, you're just trying to find the best tools that are going to work in a game. So it doesn't matter if you want to smash the patriarchy, you still have what's in front of you, which are, 22 people who have all been socialized, in the same society that you have. And we've all got these cultural norms and expectations. And so just because you want to step outside and, just be yourself and not have to worry about all that stuff, it's still there, but it's just another extra consideration that we're balancing as we're out there. And
Totally.
are we going to push it a little more in that direction? And to be fair, I've talked to a couple of the other umpires. When Currency was on, he was talking about how he's very aware that as a big, tall, stern looking guy, that he knows he comes across quite aggressively on the pitch, and that's something he's trying to work on. So I'm not saying that only women get slated for looking aggressive when they're on the pitch, not at all. But there's just these trends and tendencies that we see that we're working on, and I think if we're umpire coaches and managers, it's something that we need to be aware of when we're coaching umpires, that it's not about, I want to change who you are and now you can be a happy, bubbly, pretty little thing when you're out there. That, but that, hey, these are the tools that are going to work. And
Mm.
maybe this doesn't work quite as well as you want, and you want to use it less and that sort of thing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think probably one of the big things is that, the last thing most people on the pitch, regardless of, what kind of game or gender or whatever they are, no one wants to be perceived as aggressive. That is
No.
not something that's kind of on the checklist of skills for officials.
Yeah.
So when someone says that's how you're coming across, there is kind of like um an obligation, I'd nearly suppose, or a responsibility to go, well, okay, I don't think I'm an aggressive person. I don't think I'm an arrogant person. But if that's how I'm coming across, all it has to have is for one person to perceive that, and we've got a problem. So
Yeah.
if we've got that problem, what am I going to do to fix it? Because I don't want to come across as aggressive. And if that's my face and my face is naturally frowny and I have to do, extra meditation, or I have to take 3 seconds to process a decision or whatever it is, then that's something I have to do.
Hmm.
And as you said, like Currency can't make himself smaller, but we can probably work on the tone of his voice, or whatever it is that he does to make himself not appear aggressive, with his kind of stature or whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's figuring out what works for you to make you do the best job possible in a way that um aligns, I suppose, to the values and the things that we're trying to do with this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of those things that we can think about, because you talked about not being able to change who you are. You're 5'2", you're the build that you are. Your face muscles are aligned the way they are, and there's only so much you can do, but you can work on the things that are also part of your personality that maybe aren't quite as prominent. So for me, when people said, "Yeah, you're so bubbly and whatever off the pitch," and part of my personality is being very jokey. So I do like to try to express humor at times. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And in my last, big tournament in Antwerp in 2012, one of the things that I was really happy that I did was that I was able to make jokes in 3 different languages to the players on the pitch. And in one game, I had a French-speaking team. I had the French team playing against Mexico, and so I made a joke in Spanish and I made a joke in French in the same game, and I was like, "This is the best," and I felt really good about that. And that's one of those things. You find what can help you. That's part of it. And if you can't have your face always, being all sunshiny, maybe you can find those moments where you can build the rapport and do things. And maybe that'll start building and bleeding into the way that you look all the time. And then you start relaxing more and you're not as worried about being perfect or whatever the case might be. So there's lots of different little things that you can try. Find what's within you and bring that out rather than trying to change yourself and be something you're not. We can't be
Yeah.
guys, we can't be 6 feet tall, we can't be, whatever. So yeah,
Yeah.
really, really interesting. Simon is on this. He just wanted me to remind you that he doesn't think that your frowny face is normal. But,
Thanks.
again, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's what we have to, disassociate. This isn't a bad judgment, but it's like, is that tool effective for you in
Yeah.
the game? So that's interesting. James had a point about body language that, sort of that ties very closely into what we were talking about with, signaling and how you use your body language, the difference between, because I don't have the wide screen, but the difference between the open palm signal and then, the pointed finger. And we talk about the usage of those things as they go. How have you looked at your own body language as you're trying to change or use different types of styles of presentation on the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of comes back into the thing of making yourself big and what you can do. So yeah, I would now say that it's a combination of things. So if I want to get my point across, I'll probably have a louder, longer whistle with a pointed finger.
Hmm.
Um, but in saying that, I definitely do point my finger and have soft whistles. But where possible, for things like sidelines, even open palm, wide balls, whatever it is, yeah, I would. That's something I have definitely brought in and tried to make
Yeah.
a characteristic of it, just to try and separate. Okay, she's pointing her finger, she's not happy with that. It's a subtle sort of cue for anybody watching that definitely adds weight to it. So yeah, I do think if you're trying to go one way or the other, that is a simple thing to bring into your game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And that's very true. And sometimes focusing, because we do get in habits of how we present our calls. So it's good to try, okay, my habit is going to be, or my practice will be, when it's a 15 meter, that I will always use an open palm. When it's a sideline, I'll always use an open palm. And then that helps you distinguish the two events, like you said, and then you've got the
Mm,
ability to show, because players do notice this out of their
yeah.
peripheries. This is where they're picking up the cues from, while they're still looking at the ball or still looking at their mark or whatever it is. They can see your body language out of the corner of their eye, and they are taking in that information. So it is important.
Yeah. I remember
Yeah.
getting feedback from Peter Elders in the tournament I got my badge at, actually, where he was like, "What's wrong with your left arm?" There's nothing wrong with my left arm. Oh, why are you asking that? And he says, "Just, well, it doesn't straighten. Anytime you give a sideline, your elbow's bent. So why can't you straighten your left arm?" And I was like, okay. I'd never thought of it. I'd never even aware that I did it. But that was one of the things that I had been doing to try and be more relaxed, is that I was not fully straightening my arm, but actually it had the opposite effect. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think being aware of the signal it sends and how it's perceived. And again, that comes back to the face. It's perceived as this, therefore, you might have to think about changing it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. So we're starting to get a little conversation going on the chat here that I think is really nice, and might be a nice way to sort of tie up everything we've done now that the game's over, and we basically just talked over it the whole time, which I kind of expected. But Simon here mentioning about how it'll be good when umpire coaches talk about what actually works. Let me bring that back up again. Uh, for the person who's being coached, not necessarily how they were on the pitch. And this is a tough one, hey, because and you do quite a bit of umpire coaching, I understand, because Neil here is talking about how you're very good. Like, this is what works for me, but here this is something that might work better for you. Do you have any thoughts on that, and how we and how we are looking for our little
again,
twinsies
to
out there on the pitch?
yeah, I think again it comes back to that thing. So first of all, I mean, obviously we focused in on this whole thing of your face looks arrogant and aggressive, But at the same time, I did get positive feedback and look, this went well and whatever.
Hmm.
And a lot of it will depend on the different umpire managers you get. And, like that, they have their own personalities. They've got things that they focus on. They've got their own styles. So one of the tricks, no matter who is coaching or assessing you, is to be able to pick out the things that you need from what they're saying. Okay, I disagree with them on that. They've got a point on this, so I'm going to focus on that. Or actually, I disagree with it, but it might be something I need to think of. So that's one of the most important things, is that some of them will give feedback on what works well, and then others won't. And you just got to kind of construct your entire thing around this information and try and pick out what's important. I'd always be aware that, again, given my stature, given the different type of games that people are doing, that I can't turn around and say this is where you need to stand, or this is how you should manage that situation. And I would never say that to anybody in any situation. I will give advice on what has worked for me and kind of go try it out, but also actually go watch this person or talk to whoever and see, is there a pattern here in what we do? Do they have different ideas? And then try it. It's all you can do is to try it. That's the only way you'll kind of figure out whether it will work or not. And I think it's such a fluid game. Like, even kind of that corner I gave the stroke on in this game, where I'm standing, most of the guys will look and go, "What are you doing there?" We would never stand there. But if I stand where they stand, I'll see nothing. So is that thing of you adjust to what you need in the kind of constraints that you can, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like about what's happening with sort of education generally, and obviously you're an academic, so this isn't going to be any news to you, but in what I've been reading about when I'm trying to catch up with hockey coaches and what they're doing, is this learner-centered philosophy, and really understanding the needs of the learner and the person who is executing those skills. And I hope to see that this continues to build in umpire coaching as well, where instead of being very prescriptive about that, these are the things that you have to do in order to be good, that we are better as coaches and managers assessing how does the things that this umpire doing affect the game? How are the players responding? How are the coaches responding? That sort of thing, rather than, well, that doesn't look right because that's not how I did it. But
Yeah.
actually it's working. It looks, the players like what they're getting from that umpire. And that is the most important thing. And that's the, shifting the focus there. So yeah, I think as all of us are going through, and as you were talking about, we get better at picking out those elements that we understand. Yes, that is actually something that will improve my ability to serve this game, rather than, just make somebody happy. But we all have those moments, right, where there's sometimes we get that feedback and we're like, don't like it, but I think I'm going to have to do it, at least for this tournament, if I want to get
Yeah.
games.
Yeah.
So that's tough. Yeah, that's something I don't really like. And when we're queens of the world, Ali, we're gonna fix all this. Everything's gonna be great. It's gonna be perfect. All right. Just seeing if there's any other questions that I can catch up on. There are lots of jokes about having broken left arms because coaches are unhappy that you're you're not using it enough for their team and that sort of thing. Lots of thank yous. Elsa B is off. She's off to run. Here's a little comment. This is not actually Rosalind. This is Steve, but he likes to take over her Facebook account, talking about using video for umpires at all levels in order to be aware of, great body language and presentation points and all that sort of thing. So let me just pull that up again. Yeah, and again, that sort of, it's one thing to talk about what you've seen, but be able to actually see it and say, look, this is
Yeah.
you. And Goddard's actually sent me a video of one of his games just with a bunch of penalty corners that he had called. And I fed back to him. I said, have you noticed that this is something that you do, that every time you're calling a penalty corner, you're walking backwards? And he was like, no, I didn't. And because he has it on video, he was able to pull that information and go, oh, yeah, that is definitely a thing. If I'd have just told him after
Yeah.
a game, he'd probably say, I don't think I do that.
I can do
We
that.
all have
Yeah.
that little reaction, right? It's very interesting, but the video doesn't lie. And you're on video all
No.
the time now, so
Yeah.
that's that's got to be difficult. All right. Well, I think everybody's pretty happy. Oh, look at that. Gary thinks we're already queens of the world. So, thank you. So nice. Well, Ali, this was a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate everything you brought in. We touched on some, harder topics, and you were very, very forthcoming with your own experiences. So I think I, for one, really appreciate it. I think everybody else did as well. So thank you. And hopefully we're going to have more conversations like this in the future. It was awesome.
Yeah. No
All
problem.
right.
Yeah. Enjoyed it. Thanks, Will.
Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you at the next Umpire at Home. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.